Hello, one and all, and welcome to another episode of Classin' Up the Joint, the only show that dares to ask the question, what's your favorite character class and subclass? Say hi, everyone.
I wasn't expecting that. Hello, Colin. Hello. How are you?
I am so well. I'm so excited to be here with you. My name is Colin. I use he and they pronouns. I am the host and GM of the Roll Report, and I am joined by my fantastic guest who I was able to spring that intro on because I love listening to them so much. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Patrick Perini. I also use he, they pronouns, and I am, first and foremost, the GM of Unbalanced Encounters, the show that uses that intro format for every content episode.
It's nice to have that moment when someone's really got like a solid intro that I can just like, see what I did there. Yeah.
I've never had, you're the first person to swipe that intro format off of me, and I'm so here for it.
I'm surprised. And like, I will tell you also that, you know, you and I have talked a little bit about possibility of playing together at some point in our work spheres or just for fun. And I have been thinking a lot that like at some point I'm gonna need to really have a good question for that because I love that intro. It's so funny. It's a good cycle. You always got new fresh material. It's like the intro to Bob's Burgers.
The way that we came up with that, was actually really spur of the moment, and it's one of my favorite stories that I never get to talk about the show because it's so niche and it doesn't actually mean anything. We have never had a cohesive thesis for what this show is, for what Unbalanced Encounters is. You think about like, okay, like, Unprepared Casters has a really cohesive thesis around like, oh, they're these short little stories that you can show up unprepared for, right? You never need to have the bigger context to understand what's going on. The Adventure Zone, it's the brothers, right? It's the brothers and their dad play D&D. It's very cohesive thesis. We never really had that. We went into it thinking like, oh, we're just going to see if we can like make good art and make people feel things. And if we can, maybe we'll be able to reverse engineer something out of it. And so I'm going into it and I'm trying to like give a tagline to the show in the opening of the first episode. And I realized there just fucking isn't one, right? Like I just don't have like a cohesive tagline. So I just start like, I just say like, okay, I'm going to pick a different thing every episode to open us up. And it started by doing almost like businessy comps, right? Like Studio Ghibli meets, whatever the fuck, right?
Yeah.
And it eventually, by the end of it, it becomes very self-referential and almost tees up the attitude of the episode in a way that I think became very fun and became a little bit of an in-joke. And it literally just came from the fact that like we're not good at marketing, and I just needed a way to describe the show that I didn't have to commit to long term.
And this is why people hire marketing people at some point.
They're worth so much money if you could find good ones. They're really valuable.
There are ongoing theories, and I have like multiple conversations with people in my like theater and dance networks about whether or not we should pay for marketing and whether or not it's worth it. It's like slightly different in a performance context, but I feel like I'm going to pull a statistic out of my ass that like the marketing budget you spend should in theory give you like 50% more income if you
whatever
have
it is,
spent
it should be more than spending it, which I think the difficult thing is that it's an ocean of net negative return, right? There are a lot of people out there who think they know how to do marketing, but what they know how to do is they know how to chase trend. They know how to do the memes on TikTok. They don't necessarily know how to find the DNA of the thing and figure out what makes that special and help convey that to new audiences and find where those audiences are. And that's hard to do.
It's hard, and it's hard to stay current. I know of a group here in the Bay Area that 10 years ago, their marketing budget was full page ads in the Sunday New York Times.
Whoa,
which
that's
was like
specific.
Already print media was already dying.
Yeah.
Like the Bay Area not a lot of people get print Sunday New York Times necessarily.
Yeah, I was going to say the Bay Area doesn't listen to doesn't read the Times.
It was 75% of this company's marketing budget at the time was going to like the month around their showtime. They would have full page color New York Times ads, and I was like,
wild. Yeah, and that's just the thing. Is like that's not where your audience is, if it's not where your audience is, right? And it certainly wouldn't be for like what we do, right? And also are you really capturing the soul of what you're trying to sell, the art that you're trying to make, if you're doing a full page static color ad on the New York Times? Or is that just like the quote done thing? And a lot of people out there in the marketing world are doing the done thing, and that's where you get that net negative return. So if you could find somebody who can give you $1.10 for every dollar you hand them, that's
already
goal.
a good. Yes.
There, you're done. That's the machine, baby. But it's hard to do, and those people are really, really valuable. So.
And they're hard to find, and we were just speaking before recording about the difficulty in turning like social media followers into listeners / supporters of our art form in this case, or whatever version of it. And someone's cracked this. Someone has figured this out. And when I find that person, I will in fact try to pay them to help me do the same thing, because that knowledge is worth money and power.
It's interesting. It's interesting. I think that this is something that everybody struggles with at their level, right? And I think that pulling people from one platform to another is universally very difficult, because platforms are incentivized to keep people locked in. And I think that it doesn't matter if you're trying to go from TikTok to YouTube, because TikTok is, quote, shutting down. If you're trying to go from Twitter to Threads because Elon Musk is a fucking crazy person. Not that I particularly endorse Threads, but like whatever, right? Like whatever you're trying to do, the platform's going to try to keep your audience in place. And that's especially true if you're trying to get people from a platform to a product, to art or your mailing list or your Discord or whatever it is. It's really, really, really hard to get people to see and then act in a way that gets them into a different little silo. And, I think that that's a big part of why people are holding on to Twitter as hard as they are, is because they can't get their numbers off of it onto anywhere else. And, I think that it's one of the great problems of digital feudalism is that it's hard to move the audiences around.
That's the word for it. It is a tragedy, setting apart politics, because we don't super get into politics on this show. We did touch on it briefly. Just the problems when audiences and their interactions with content creators, with artists, with musicians, with whoever it is, are so heavily siloed off.
Yeah.
Like everyone's just bumping against the walls and trying to figure it out, I feel like.
No, I think that's absolutely right.
Yeah. And to transition a little bit towards Unbalanced Encounters, to the hopeful, I feel like in my time listening to the show and kind of engaging and seeing what is going on in the Discord, you have both created a pretty strong community that seems invested and engaged, and they're showing up. And one, that is awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I have the sense that you and the rest of the cast have done this very consciously, and put in real effort to nurture and to cultivate and to retain that community. And I don't know that I have a question as much as like, can you speak to some of the efforts that you guys have done behind that?
No, absolutely. And I think it is a good transition, because I think we sort of looked at that problem very much in the same way that I looked at, hey, what's the marketing slug for the show? I don't know. I'm going to make up a new one every episode. We looked at the problem of how do we build meaningful numbers and then convert them off into, a different platform, or this new podcast that we're working on when we launched Unbalanced Encounters. And we kind of decided like, hey, what if we just didn't do that, right? What if we didn't focus on the in marketing parlance, the sort of top of the funnel, the biggest number, the TikTok views? What if instead we focused on building genuine community? And this is something that I see a lot of people talk about in the TTRPG space, the content creation space. The difference between audience and community is, we a lot of people throw around the term community when they mean audience because it sounds less egotistical, right? But they are fundamentally different things. And it's not a bad thing to have an audience. In fact, it's a necessary part of creating performance art. The show doesn't exist if no one sees it, right? And
you can get some real existential tree falling in the woods question like that, but yeah.
And I think that I think that it is not necessarily important that audience is made up of your friends, that audience is engaging with you in a regular way. But I do think that when you're trying to build something that's going to last for a really long time or have any shot at organic growth, you do need to foster a community because they are going to be the people who suit up for you on a regular basis. And that goes kind of in both directions. They're going to be the people who are bringing their friends into the fold. They're going to be the people who are talking to each other, helping each other, finding new connections within the network that you create that makes you a big part of their life. But they're also going to be the ones who call you on shit. They're going to be the ones who say like, hey, I don't like the way that you guys handled this, or I don't, I want to contribute and I don't feel included, right? And that feedback is I think just as valuable.
Yeah.
And I think that if you can figure out how to build a community, however small, that becomes something that you can genuinely build on top of. And so once you do start to focus on that top line number and you're like, how do I get the views? How do I get the engagement? How do I get the conversion? How do I get people through into the space that I've cultivated, the garden that I've cultivated, where I know there are other good people? The experiences that those people are going to have coming through are going to be meaningful, positive, and self-reinforcing. And I think that is something that we have always tried to do, largely just by not getting wrapped up in whether or not the numbers going up fast enough. And I think that between that and a measure of respect for the people in the space, we've come quite a long way, right? Like one of the things that we try to do within our community is really allow them to be collaborators and to, as best we can, get to know little bits and pieces about them as people. We have regular community events that, for a long time, it was just us playing Jackbox with people, right? It was just like, we're going to grab one of the cast members, whoever's available once a month, and our community manager, and we're going to jump on a Jackbox call, and we're just going to play silly drawing games with the people who are like our fan artists and stuff, and literally just anything to kind of give them a space to get to hear a little bit of our voices and vice versa, if that's something that they were comfortable with. And it's grown and it's evolved, and right now we're in the midst of what I think has been our most successful community building initiative to date, which is this ongoing PvP D&D battle royale.
I'm so sad I'm gone for the next one.
Listen, we've got 2 more months. 2 more months of free for all on that, and I think it's going to be there's more opportunity. But it's been such a fun way to like do a little stream with the folks who are in our community, and now all of a sudden they feel like they're part of the extended play space that we're starting to cultivate. And I think that those are some of the things that we've done very actively to foster room for that kind of interaction. But once you get that going and there's a little bit of an engine going there, you'll find the people that really jump out and say like, I want to help make this space meaningful, right? I mean, we've got a couple of folks in our Discord that like are constantly organizing Magic the Gathering games with one another. We've got art feedback and people talk about their campaigns and they get help on their character builds. And now that we're doing this casting process, which is a little topical, I'm not sure when this episode's going to come out, but we're in the middle of the casting process for season 2.
I think auditions will be closed by the time this comes out, but I think you'll be in like review and selection.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was just gonna say this is another thing that like you grew the community, and I have seen personally been part of the Discord for a while. Like I've seen 70-ish new people just like rolling in because there was an open casting call and they're like, oh my God, this looks cool. And all the people here are great. And as far as I can tell, they're sticking around.
Yeah. And we haven't had, I've been watching this really closely because I'm neurotic.
Yep.
We've had, I think,
analytics can really lean hard into those.
Yeah. We had one person, we've had one person sort of come in, stay for a couple days and then turn back out. Everybody else has stuck around, which I think is really great. And they've been very active. And the thing that really got me, and this was something that hit me while I was at Gen Con, not really able to be very present in the Discord, is that first wave of applicants sort of dove straight in. And they're in the channel in our Discord that we opened up for the casting call. And there's, someone, I imagine some kid somewhere who's not got a ton of experience in performing arts, especially online, kind of under their belt. I don't know their story, but that's kind of my bias I'm putting on them. It's like, hey, I just realized like I don't really know how to record audio, right? Like, do I use my gaming headset? Like, what do I do? And I'm looking at my phone on the middle of the goddamn Gen Con floor trying to stave off a fucking crowd-fueled panic attack. And I'm like, okay, I want to respond to this guy because, this person, because, I want to demonstrate that we're paying attention and we're here to help. I didn't get time because the other new people who are ostensibly, at least, from the outside, they look like they're in competition with this kid. They jump in and they're like, hey, if you've got a decent phone, newish phone, that's probably going to be your best microphone that you have in your house. You're going to go into your closet that's hopefully filled with clothes. You're going to put it 6 inches away from your mouth. You're going to speak clearly into it. And that's going to be the best that you can do. But you're going to want to think about upgrading if you do get the... And they're having this conversation. They're saying exactly what I would be saying in such gentle, supportive ways. And that's when you know that you've really done something because you telegraph to the world, this is who we are. This is what we stand for in this house. And if you show up, we expect you to behave similarly. People do. And they want to show up with kindness and they want to show up with supportiveness. And you're going to self-select for that every time if you do it right from the ground up.
Yeah. I honestly, I couldn't agree more. And I think I observed some of that interaction too. And I was like, wow. Well, and it has continued to happen.
Yeah.
I think that, just even within the casting call, within general, as people are asking these questions specifically about auditions with people, you're correctly, in theory, they are competing with, everyone's like, nah, you fucking got this. Here's the gear you need. Here, I love the people who are like, can I share my like audition file? Can I, and they're like talking about the characters, and everyone's having a great time, even knowing, I think at one point someone was like, okay, let's do the cold hard math. There's between 4 and 20 people that they might pick, maybe, depending on how it all shakes out. And everyone's like, and cool, you're still great.
Absolute top 10% of these people are getting pulled, and that number's going down every day. And, and I think that something that really resonates when you do community building right is that this is not a competitive, I need to be constantly paying attention, sort of anxiety provoking space. This is a place where you can be a person. And if in the course of being a person, you get a chance to play with us, that's fantastic. We're so excited about that. If that isn't what ends up happening, you're still occupying this space with us as people. We are not trying to build, don't get me wrong, we are trying to build audience, right? Like that's really important. We have I think at our peak, our best month of the show, we had 10,000 people listen to the show, right? And we have, I think, 500 people in our Discord, right? So that's, what is that? 1/2 of 1%. It's nothing, right? And so, there's a huge gap between our audience and our community. We're not looking for audience, but I think that when we think about who's going to be with us for the long haul, who's going to be our gut check on whether or not we're doing good work, and who's going to welcome the new most active people in our space, it's the community that we foster very intentionally.
Yeah. And there's the 10,000 people will bring you, more algorithmic stuff, and like hopefully some of them start giving you money. But that community, that fraction, that 1%, are the ones that are the most engaged. They're the most excited. They're the ones that want to call you on things if like something doesn't feel right. Provide story ideas. Throw random spoiler projections into chats and they'll stick. Yeah, I think you've said it right. They will stick around and they will be there for the long haul.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. We all this, and I still haven't asked you the most important question. The most important question.
Yeah, hit me.
Patrick.
Yeah.
What is your favorite character? Well, okay. Nope.
Yeah, hit me.
I rewind that statement because I haven't asked you the first question that I've been asking people and to lead into this, which is how did D&D start for you? How did table or RPGs, if it wasn't D&D, like
what a good question.
This is a for many people that I've been talking to, and for myself, this is now like a lifelong thing. But was there a game? Was there a time when it grabbed you in particular?
It's a good question. Because I think I've had a bit of a weird biphasal relationship with TTRPGs because, like a lot of us, I'm in high school. I'm doing theater, right? Like I was very fortunate to grow up with like a pretty robust theatrical education, and that translated into me doing a fair amount of theater in high school, which then does make you a fucking theater kid, right? Like that's
Yes,
just
it
the way
does.
that goes. And so that's
Hard
who
to
I'm
avoid.
hanging out with, and I grew up in the nexus middle of nowhere, right? Like smack dab in the middle of four major East Coast cities. So Cowfield, right? And so there's nothing to fucking do. And so we're playing 3.5 and eventually 4th ed because there's nothing to fucking do, right? And we're playing it very badly. And we're playing it with a lot of people with a lot of like unresolved childhood anger issues and just being 14 and whatever the fuck, right?
Yep.
And so it was a pretty miserable experience, but like it was something to do and it was part of a community to sort of be a part of. And we hung out at the game store, we bought the dice and whatever. And as I sort of grew up and eventually shipped off to university and started thinking about career and started thinking about like how do I want to occupy space in the world, I drifted away from it pretty hard as I did sort of all performing arts. And I started focusing on, what was going to make me quote unquote successful. And that lasted for, more or less, I'd say all of my 20s, right? That was sort of where I was.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until I guess it was right before the pandemic. It must have been late 2018 or early 2019. A buddy of mine, who was, in the same professional space as me, kind of lived down the street, actually in San Francisco. I'd been out in San Francisco for a while. I came up to me, and he was like, listen, I know you don't care much about the McElroys because I don't listen to anything that they do other than Taz. I know you don't care much about the McElroys, but you need to listen to the Adventure Zone. And I was like, that nerd shit, right? Like, you sure? And he was like, no, listen, man, we grew up in the same place because we had coincidentally grew up in the same place and then met in San Francisco much later. He's like, we grew up in the same place. We grew up about an hour away from where they set Taz Amnesty. And it feels like home in a really interesting way. And it's super grounded and it's funny and it's irreverent, but like, it's not that silly D&D cringe shit that I remembered from my childhood, right?
Yeah.
And again, kill the cop in your head that believes in cringe, right? Like that was a lesson I had to learn. It took a long time, but I at the time that was a big limiter in my life.
Yeah.
And I listened to it, and spoilers for Taz Amnesty, I guess. Clint McElroy's character dies toward the end, and the way that they shot that scene, and the way that Clint played that out, I will go back and listen to it whenever I feel like I need to cry for reasons I don't understand, right? When I need to touch on an emotion that I know that my body is carrying, but I can't get my brain to sit on it, I will go listen to that scene because there is nothing else I have ever experienced other than a few Unbalanced Encounters things that will just do that for me.
Yeah.
Right? It's incredible. It changed my life.
Yeah.
And so I got back into it and I picked up 5e because that's what my friends were playing. I knew I wanted to play Powered by the Apocalypse. I knew I wanted to play Monster of the Week, at some point, but I picked up 5e because that's what my friends were playing. And because my reintroduction to GMing was so heavily inspired by Taz Amnesty, which I consider to be the most cinematic of the Amnesty arcs, my GMing style veered really cinematic, really hard. And so all of my campaigns, I was
going to say, I think you're one of the first GMs that I've heard frequently say our camera goes in the direction but it's true. And in touch on that for just a moment, like I think as GMs, when we are describing that world, like it helps to think of it cinematically and to think if you were watching this on a movie, what does your camera do? You see the overview and then you fly around the thing and you swoop down and you get closer and then you end at like where you want the scene to be.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense. Is like where it comes from. Yeah.
I will say that I don't know if you have any familiarity, but maybe your listeners don't. If you go and read the original Apocalypse world that begat the Powered by the Apocalypse systems, they talk about the camera as a GM tool. It's actually mechanically reinforced that that's something that you're supposed to do. The only unit of timekeeping that they have in the game is scenes. And that's the way that time works in the thing because it's so cinematically coded to like the Mad Max style apocalypse stuff, right? And then Powered by the Apocalypse is an extension. A lot of them carry forward that cinematography into the language of the game. And so I think that there's not a right way to be a GM, but I think there are advantageous ways to be a GM if you're trying to make a show that people are going to listen to, right?
Yeah.
And I think that cinematography like exists because we have gone through the refiner's fire of figuring out how to manage the attention and artistic sensibilities and intuitions of the audience, right? And so bringing that language and legacy into tabletop RPGs is really valuable if you're trying to get somebody to listen to something, right? Because it lets you hit their brain in a way that they can visualize.
You've given them the visual cues for this environment to create the nice mental picture of the thing. Yeah,
exactly. And so that's how I got back into it. It was legitimately, it was Clint McElroy and Taz Amnesty, and I ran some home games and had some people be like, "Hey, like you're really good at the cinematography in the play." I had one of my players for my first 5e campaign straight up say like, "I don't think I'll ever play another 5e campaign because I don't think any other GM will be able to stack up to that." And I was like, "That's a lot of fucking pressure, bro. That's weird."
Right.
But it was meant very earnestly, and
it begs the question to me of that first campaign: what was the overall arc, either level progression or like, how far did you get?
I think it was 1 to 15. It was pretty long. I was pretty generous with the level ups. We did a pretty similar arc structure to Unbalanced Encounters. So it was roughly 10 episodes sessions, roughly 10 sessions, and then a double level up. I think maybe I bumped them 3 at the end, similarly to what we're doing in Unbalanced Encounters. So it was a pretty big jump, but it was 1 to 15. Yeah. It was very pirate coded game. It started. It was Ghosts of Saltmarsh for exactly one half of one session, and the half of the session that it was the middle half of the first session. So it was like a quarter of it was not Saltmarsh, and then we transitioned into Saltmarsh, and then it just fell apart, and the last quarter was not Saltmarsh, and I gave up. I just gave up on trying to run it.
Love that. I mean,
and it became a
props for rolling where your players are sending you.
Yeah.
Hello, fellow tradespeople. This is Ben. I hope you are enjoying this podcast as much as we are. If you are, please leave us a 5-star rating on whatever podcast platform you are listening on. Also, go ahead and follow us on social media at the Roll Report Cast. If you are feeling especially supportive and fancy and delightful, you can also support us on Patreon, which we would really love and appreciate. And you get all kinds of really fancy special bonus perks for doing that. All right, back to the show.
There was something you said that I agree with. I think I agree very, very much. There's not a right way to GM. There's the advantageous ways to depending on your own strengths, depending on your audience and your goals. The way I GM for my home game is not necessarily the way I would like do for a podcast. I prepare much more for the podcast, honestly.
Turns out.
But I do think there are some wrong things. There are some habits that I feel like some GMs get into that if I was a player, would be like, I don't like this.
Sure.
I still feel like I don't have the right to tell anyone else how to run their game except being like reinforcing actually what Emily and I were talking about. It is not, I think it is not DM versus players.
I agree.
I think you cannot have an antagonistic relationship with your table if you're the GM and really do something that's fun for everybody.
I agree. And I think that while I agree that there's no right way to GM, I think that's a stylistic conversation versus a relationship conversation. And again, I look to Powered by the Apocalypse, which mechanizes this relationship where in every PBTA that I've ever read that's been worth anything, the GM is said to be some form of a fan of the players. And then they break that down into the GM wants to see the players succeed in telling the story that the players want to tell, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is the way that you need to really get your hands around what it means to be a GM. Because at the end of the day, your players want to be challenged.
Yeah.
They want to have consequence. They want to have their heartstrings tug on. They want to feel like things matter and are in peril. but they don't want to feel helpless. They don't want to feel universally defeated.
Yeah.
They don't want to feel like they're being beaten down or that they are ruining a friendship by showing up to this game. And so you have to be ultimately on their side. And my favorite piece of advice, and we say this, we say this like a goddamn hallelujah in a church around Unbalanced Encounters, which is drive it like a stolen car.
Wow.
With it, when I pick up an NPC, especially my villains, I drive them like a stolen car. I want them to both fuck things up and get fucked up to do exactly what I need to do in this moment. I'm not going to be precious about it, right?
Yeah.
And that means that if my players pull off something sick, they're going to land an explosion on this goddamn car, and I'm not going to feel bad about it because that was the whole point, right?
Yeah.
And I think that if you can get your head around that mentality for your world, that you are building a space for them to fuck things up in the ways that are going to be meaningful to them, then you have gotten the right end of the stick on the relationship.
Yeah. And the sort of mental shift internally as a DM from like, my players fucked up this encounter that I spent hours planning for to my players are so fucking smart. I didn't see that coming in a million years. And now, okay, let's take a quick 5 while I figure out what to do next because y'all are smart.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Also, take breaks. Take breaks. If I have one piece of GM, I have lots of pieces of GM advice. If I have one piece of GM advice that I think gets swept under the rug a lot, it's that like, we do a lot of like, it's fine to take breaks. You're human. If you need 5 minutes to think about something, like your players are going to understand. No, shut the fuck up, shut the fuck up, shut the fuck up. You don't understand. Players love that shit. When players get something over on you, that you walk away from your goddamn camera or stand up out of the DM's chair to walk to the other side of the room and say, you guys fucked me up on this. I need 10 minutes. They love that shit.
They'll be so excited.
They're so excited. So not only do you get the time that you need to think about the thing that you need to consider, you have just made your players' day.
Yeah.
Use it. Give it to them. Give them the goddamn win. They didn't beat you. They did something clever. Respect that and take the time that you need. You're all going to come out on top.
I could not agree more. It's not about beating. It's ingenious solutions to problems that you create.
Yeah.
My housemate likes to say like the point of stories is like, you chase the guy up a tree, and while he's in the tree, you throw rocks at him until he figures out how to come down. And I'm like, that is actually kind of the really short nutshell of like how to tell a story that has some consequences. Like,
sure.
He can't just go up the tree and find there's a wonderful array of fruit growing on the branches and a pet squirrel that delivers drips grapes into the character's mouth. Like,
100%.
Then you have Disney World, and like no one I think is interested in that shit. But you throw a few rocks and you like knock the bird's nest, and he's got to catch it and save the eggs.
Yeah. Yeah.
To stretch that metaphor as far as I possibly can.
I mean, it's good though. It's good though because it's a really simple, elegant way of demonstrating ultimately what conflict is, right? Because conflict doesn't need to just, and the rules of 5e put us in a really tight box a lot of the time because it's sword and board, right? It's a combat simulator. That's its DNA. That's what it's always been. It was only really ever honest about that with 4th edition. So like that's just the way it is. And when you try to do anything that isn't threaten your party's HP pool, you're really operating without a net. And I think that that's a disservice that the game does to a lot of GMs. But also, I think that it's okay to accept that there are other things that you can do outside of threatening the HP pool that will work in 5e. And again, I recommend playing other games to get a sense of what that feels like from a different mechanics perspective. But even if you just look to storytelling, you looked at this exact metaphor, you come up with the idea of, okay, they're up the tree. What do? I try to knock the nest out. That's a lateral way to threaten the party, threaten what they care about, and not have to just be hitting the HP pool.
Yeah. And I to compliment and continue, I think Unbalanced Encounters has done that really well in everything that I've listened to. Both yourself and the rotating GMs for the bonus arcs and the small one-shots. Like, there is a real care and attention to not doing a dungeon crawl because it's, again, my housemate and I have compared it to like listening to sports when you're just listening to combat, which can be interesting if you're into it and if you like, know the rules of the game and stuff. But also that's not necessarily why people tune in.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so,
it's certainly
yeah,
not for
to-
Unbalanced Encounters. To
Sure.
set expectations if you've never listened to the show, Unbalanced
No.
Encounters is fucking not that. And there are lots of good shows that do that. We've had a blast doing the little battle royales in our Discord that are just sports, right? There's very little character play at all. The main show on the show Unbalanced Encounters is narrative. It's all about narrative, and it's all about that sort of like lateral heartstring tug as opposed to threatening the HP pool.
Yeah. Come for the heartstrings, stay for the mommy issues.
Yeah, oh my God. They sprung so many mommy issues on me, and I was just like, okay, I gotta go with it. I gotta go with it.
Yes, they did. I'm going to save that for a moment and now ask you the most important question, the two most important questions. Patrick, what is your favorite character class or classes in 5e? And I will say that I have realized that I now am expanding it. Like anything core rules, I probably know what's going on. If it's third party, please tell me, but you got to also tell me what the hell it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Goodness. I think that I often have a hard time teasing apart mechanics from narrative. And I think that the only mechanical kind of mile marker that I use to say, like, I'm going to have fun playing this character is how are they on skills? And so my rotation tends to be, it takes a lot of work to pry me away from Rogue, Bard, Tasha's variant Ranger. That's where I live, right? Those are my standbys. And I think that getting more specific and like plucking one of them and saying like, this is the one that I would pick if I had to choose no others, fuck, it might be Rogue, but like that's tough.
I mean, I have not yet made anyone try to go that hard into a thing, and I'm certainly not. No, I love this answer because people have approached this from different ways. Some people are like, the mechanics of X are the thing I love, the narrative flavor of Y are what I love, and for you to say that it is, what I'm suspecting is it is the skill expertise and the broad array of like, you can be good at all the social situations as well as have a lot of utility in a combat or in like something where you need to be doing initiative based checks and encounters.
Exactly. And I think a lot of it for me comes down to I am always trying to think of the narratively interesting and often comedically interesting thing to do in the moment, right? Especially for like a long-term campaign. You put me in like a core dungeon crawl and I'm going to get real min-maxy with it because that's just, I love the math. But but for something that's longer term and something that does have a little bit of a story behind it, I'm definitely going to want to be thinking about what is more interesting than I hit the guy with the sword. And I often find that what GMs do when they don't have a specific ability, feature, or attack to tie that to in the action economy is they just pull the hatch and fall back to skills. And that's kind of how 5e is designed, right? It's kind of, skills are everything that isn't hitting a guy or casting a spell. And so if I can be good at the skills, then I can figure out how to leverage a wider variety of interactions with the world in a way that like makes me feel like I'm doing interesting shit, right? As opposed to just figuring out how to use the prefab
How do I
toolkit.
hit the hardest with the biggest axe?
Not that there's anything wrong with that. Listen, most of my friends play singularly barbarians. They like hitting shit. It's just not, I'm far more interested in figuring out like, how do I, and honestly, I play Baldur's Gate kind of like this too, which is like, how do I make sure that I'm lining everybody up so that I can knock them all off the cliff, right? How do I make sure that I'm like trapping someone in a room and like pulling the lever at the right time so that we're letting them through one at a time, fucking Sparta style, right? Like that's the kind of stuff that I love. And again, a lot of GMs rule that as skills mechanics, and so that's where I like to have most of my juice.
I mean that makes a lot of sense. I would also say this, to me, this is, you're like the characters that can aid the storytelling the most, that have on some level and debatably the most ability to affect the narrative outside of combat with specific choices or specific skills.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. I'm trying to remember the specific difference in what Tasha's Cauldron did to Rangers.
Oh yeah, it's the variant. They got rid of Deft Explorer and added like Nature Expert or whatever the fuck it's called. I forget what the feat is, but
they're like optional class features.
It's the optional class feature for first level where you can get rid of the like difficult terrain stuff and you basically just get a singular expertise.
So Deft Explorer is a whole thing. It replaces the Natural Explorer. At first level, you are canny, quote.
There it is.
You gain expertise. You get a proficiency doubled for any ability check for that skill, and you can speak, read, and write 2 additional languages.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. And if I am remembering, I want to poke at the I feel like you and Emily also worked out some stuff. We'll specifically say for Safra, and I don't think any of it is spoiled at this point, but that was directly related to the Natural Explorer or the Deft Explorer versus Natural.
We did a thing because she ended up taking this interesting mix of like some Tasha's, some not for Safra, where she took Deft Explorer, but then also took Favored Enemy. Right. And the Favored Enemy that she picked right at the top was Beasts, and then I think eventually she took Fae. I forget exactly. I think it might have been Fiends at some point. What we said was like, hey, we want this to kind of synergize, and Favored Enemy is interesting, but there's not a lot going on there, right? And so what we're going to do is that we're going to give you for your Deft Explorer rolling survival to recall these like ancestral stories that were passed down to you that are going to give you meaningful pieces of information about your situation, especially as it pertains to your favorite enemies. And again, without getting too much into spoiler territory, that little mechanical change, which I think showed up mostly in Arc 1, and we hit it a couple more times throughout the rest of the show, but like as they get bigger and bigger into the world, the stories become, less and less applicable. But it set up such a rich world building dynamic where all of a sudden her grandmother has been passing down these stories to her, which characterizes the grandmother, who Emily ends up playing in the bonus arc Small Gods Scatter, when we learn about how she was effectively driven out of her homeland. And part of what Nick Plaisance, who plays Basil in Small Gods Scatter, picked up on was the storytelling mechanic that we sewed into Deft Explorer in Arc 1, and he made it his fucking mission to be like, and this is why we tell stories. And so one of the last moments that we get with Rosa, who's Emily plays in Small Gods Scatter, is her committing to always telling the oral history of these people on behalf of Nick's character Basil, and it was such a beautiful connecting moment that really just came out of like, how do we make this skill expertise really hit? Because in a cinematic campaign, you're not going to be doing a lot of survival checks to find food in the fucking woods. We're just not doing that, right? So what do we make survival about? And it was about recalling these survival imperative stories from her ancestral history. It was, I think, a really cool loop that we pulled.
Yeah, very, very much. And I think it's something that I noticed and have been trying. We're Roll Report is in the middle of like series of one shots that are either in world or out of world as we go. And some of that in the foreshadowing and like recurring of things that you guys have been doing was very inspiring to me. And I'm like, how do I run these one shots so they actually affect the things in the main campaign when we get back to them?
Yeah.
And like, yes, there's a whole wanted poster and like situation because the insane clowns destroyed the government building and burned down. It was like, it's the episode we just released this week in August, early August. And like, it was insane. And I was like, guys, there's going to be consequences. Like your characters that you're playing right now might not see them, but soon.
Yeah.
But
I love
soon.
that. I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
That's so much fun.
Amazing. So within those, favorite subclass or classes.
Yeah.
Or I don't know, maybe it's from a totally different class. That has definitely happened before.
Absolutely. I think I think on paper, my favorite subclass in the game is the lore bard. And I think that is largely because it doesn't really do anything besides give you, you get your expertises from Bard, you get your Bardic from Bard, you get your Jack of all trades from Bard, and then you just get a bunch of fucking spells from whatever and whomever, whatever the fuck, right? And it is, I think to my mind, the like best blank slate Bard chassis. And one of the things that I think people criminally undersell in D&D is how much fun bards are when you don't play them as the goddamn minstrel, right? Like, they don't need to be horny luthiers. That's not, there are other bards exist. Bards can be, any of your inspirational jobs,
diplomats.
right? Like diplomats, captains, right?
Any kind of performer, motivational speaker, journalist.
We had in Blight at the Museum, Craig Pate played just like a smooth talking street reporter, and he was a whispers bard, and it was the coolest thing I've ever seen in the world, right? It's such a good fucking combo. And so like lore is the bardiest chassis that gives me the most play over what that's gonna be. And I think that for me allows me to sell the bard in whatever direction I want, which I feel really strongly about.
Yeah.
But I also really like the, I think it's the Mastermind Rogue that gets help as a bonus action at 30 feet.
Yes.
Yeah, the Mastermind Rogue I think is really, really fun, specifically for that, because it's just like, that's such a cool thing to always be able to drop your bonus action on and figure out just like you're calling shots, you are in the back lines, just figuring out how to get the angle on people. I think that's a really fun chassis as well. So I am a big fan of very simple supportive mechanics when I'm playing characters. Again, assuming that I'm not playing just a straight damage dealing dungeon crawl, especially because I feel like it sets up those narrative moments that everybody does really hook onto and remember.
And I think, again, what I'm seeing in some commonality is the enhanced ability to affect the storytelling and the outcome of whatever you're doing in that moment.
Right.
That's not stabbing someone.
Yes.
And increasing the skills. Like just, lore bards, you get your extra 3 proficiencies at 3rd level.
Yeah, there it is.
So, with Jack of all trades and expertise, I feel like you got a solid 50% of the skill tree.
It's half. I think
at
it's like
least
7.
proficients.
Yeah.
Cutting words is always fun.
Cutting words.
Anyone
really
within
good.
60 feet of you does a d20 or a damage. I forgot that it's on a damage too.
Yeah.
You can roll your bardic and subtract it.
Yep.
Additional magical secrets beyond basic bard class, and then what is it? Oh, the 14th level peerless skill. You can expend a bardic die on an ability check and add it to the total.
So you basically get bardic on yourself. It is the cleanest bard chassis.
It is bardy as bards can be.
And I am always it's so interesting because in big chunky games like 5e where there are a lot of rules and mechanics to sort of keep kicking around in your head, I really gravitate toward the flavor light stuff. I find that like there are several classes and subclasses, especially in the Warlock, as you start to kind of kick around some of the more specific things that like this feels too much like something. This feels too much like something for me to really get something out of it, which is like, it's the exact opposite feedback that I give people when I give them like homebrew advice or writing advice, is like make people feel like this is already something, like they can kind of see it.
Yeah.
I just don't gravitate to it because I've got such a writer's brain for the character that I want to create that like I want the mechanics to kind of get out of the way. And this varies game to game, but like in D&D especially, I really, really, really like very simple subclasses that just kind of get out of my way and give me a blank canvas to build something on top of.
Yeah. And again, touching on the mastermind, it's the canvas that you get to build your teammates up.
Yes.
I think some of the most.
Yeah.
It's bard rogue combo with like a mastermind and anything. You have far too many things to do with a bonus action at that point. Really,
that's a serious gripe. I played a mastermind eloquence bard in I think the longest campaign that I got to be a player in, and he was a tremendous amount of fun. He was a goblin curator of an antiquities museum who was like a shitty Indiana Jones. but he could talk his way
It's
out
like
of
breaks
it. So
all
it's
the objects as he steals them.
It was
Shit.
exactly. And it was a really fun combination to play, and it really bounced off of itself very nicely, especially from a skills perspective. I had like plus 15s to everything by the time I was done. But the bonus action crowding is a real thing. It's a real thing. It's like I could do one of 15 bonus actions.
It is one of the things that I do sometimes respect rules as written for D&D, that they have tried to not let you fully break the game by multi-classing, and yet, I mean, people still absolutely do.
Sure.
I saw someone talking about the new rules for Spirit Guardians as being able to just like run around a battlefield. We don't talk about one D&D here because we pretend it doesn't exist.
Yeah,
I'm not looking forward to trying to learn the whole new system.
My recommendation, and I mean this with all sincerity, is don't. We are. I think this might be the first time that I'm saying this even remotely publicly, but our plan at the moment is to move from 5e, which everyone kind of wants to get off of at this point. Like the people who care about ethics want to get off 5e because Wizards is bad. The people who care about Wizards want to get off 5e because they want you to move to D&D 2024, right? So everybody is pushing, kind of away from 5e. Our plan is to at least initially replace it with Kobold Press's Tales of the Valiant, which I think is a more smooth transition that also has the added benefit of not forcing another Wizards product into the conversation.
At some point, I really hope I will talk to someone from one of these companies because I am so curious about their relationship specifically with D&D Beyond and the fact that Grim Hollow and Drakkenheim and Kobold and I think Hit Point Press all have products now on D&D Beyond.
I don't think Kobold does. The rest of them definitely do. I think Mage Hand is also up there for something. Yeah. Maybe.
And it seems like they are... Wizards is making a concerted effort to increase their third-party content, and I am curious why these companies are going along with it, because presumably, I guess more eyes on their products, but like some large percentage of revenue sharing if products are bought on D&D Beyond. Anyway, on that super happy note, we're going to talk about some upcoming plans for Unbalanced Encounters, which if you want to hear, sadly for you, perhaps happily for me, you're going to have to find the Roll Report on Patreon. Patreon.com/The Roll Report, and then you'll hear all the things because we're gonna pick into things. Patrick, thank you so much for joining me. It has been such a delight and such a pleasure. We have spoken a couple times, and every time I'm always so happy and like walk away with a big fucking smile on my face.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's gonna be good.
Where can people find you on the interwebs? Where should they go?
100%. So we've been talking a lot about Unbalanced Encounters. If you want to find the show, again, that's where most of my head is most of the time. That's going to be unbalancedencounters.com. Pretty straightforward. If you want to find my personal stuff, and there's not a ton of it above and beyond the show, but there's some, you can head on over to pcperini.com, pcperini.com. I've got some links to a few other things that I'm kind of kicking around at the moment. I am in the process of scene directing an audio drama that I'm very excited about that will hopefully be a little bit more public by the time this comes out.
Cool.
I have
put some links if it is.
Yeah, I've contributed to Grim Games, Emily Graymore's The Cunning Folk, which we're both very, very excited about from a design perspective. I'm giving a talk at Big Bad Con, actually on casting. So if you're going to be at Big Bad Con 2024, I'm going to be giving I'm going to be on a panel talking about how to successfully cast for an actual play with some incredible people, including Emily and D&D Imposter, Logan the GM, and Gnome Ann. So we're very excited about that as well.
Amazing. Yeah. Check out Unbalanced Encounters. It's a good time. This episode will probably come out after the audition call, but like, go do it anyway. Send in late stuff. Make their lives harder. Don't do that.
I don't know if you're going to be able to, but like, join the Discord. Yeah. It's on the website. It's all on the website.
Yeah, it is amazing. And check out The Roll Report. We are at The Roll Report Cast on Instagram and TikTok, and you can find us wherever you find your podcasts for lots more exciting interviews, including with the fabulous Emily Graymore, and who knows, maybe I'll get the rest of the cast to come by. I still don't have an outro. Sometime I'll figure this out. The only show that asks the question, what happens when you don't have an outro?
Yeah, that seems about right.
Yeah,
okay,
that's about good. That's the one.